Welcome to Westbrook's COVID Conversations series. Today, we're lucky enough to be joined by Robert Paddock on the topic of online education in South Africa, especially in the context of COVID-19. For those of you who haven't come across Robert before, Robert is the co-founder of online education business GetSmarter. He's also an executive director at Hubble Studios, a board member at Injini, and CEO at the Valenture Institute. Rob, it's great to have you with us today.
Thanks so much, Dino.
So for those who haven't heard your story, to give the listeners a little bit of background, obviously yourself and your brother Sam are responsible formally for SA-based tech startup GetSmarter, which you founded in 2008 and later sold in 2017 to US-listed company 2U for an amount in excess of $100 million. Obviously a fantastic South African tech startup story. Tell us just a little bit more around GetSmarter and what it's designed to do.
Yeah, thank you. So we started GetSmarter, as you mentioned, in 2008, my brother Sam and I. We actually had been working with my parents, my mother Mandy and my father Graham, before that in delivering online short courses in collaboration with the University of Cape Town. And we realized that there was an immense demand around South Africa, not only to access a top university such as the University of Cape Town, but in order to actually study conveniently from home without having to fly down to the university and attend a in-person workshop, or if indeed a full degree, and have to up their lives and move to Cape Town. So it was really encouraging to see the uptake right from the outset. I think we got quite lucky in some regards. As it relates to the university, we managed to find a number of really dynamic individuals at the university who were prepared to push the envelope, as it were. One must remember that back in 2008, at least in education circles, e-learning or online learning was this kind of dirty word. It was like this thing that happened somewhere in corporate education and not necessarily was going to be associated with prestigious universities such as UCT. So thankfully, just managed to find some really dynamic and progressive individuals within the university who were willing to push the envelope and take a chance. And so we launched that business. We focused almost exclusively on servicing students throughout South Africa for the first number of years. We started to branch out somewhat by working then with the University of Stellenbosch, as well as the University of Witwatersrand. And really, I guess the good news spread, and it was about 2015 where we realized what we were doing with UCT and Wits and Stellenbosch, what we were achieving both commercially for our university partners as well as educationally, was actually quite atypical in the broader ecosystem. And we realized that there was this great opportunity to extend the capability that we had developed with universities in South Africa and start working with truly the world's leading universities. So I then basically went and lived on a plane for a couple of years, and we realized that we couldn't start with a kind of mid-tier university and eventually work our way up. You either start at the top or you never get there. So we gave ourselves the rather difficult challenge to not settle for anything less. And we got our big break at the end of 2015. We signed a partnership with MIT, and our very first program was a course in fintech. And so this is an online short course that took 10 weeks in duration. We started marketing this program, and to our great delight, we ended up recruiting 2,900 students at $2,300 each. And it transformed our business overnight. We went from a more predominantly South Africa and Southern Africa focused business operating in South African standard hours to just about a 24/7 operation, educating students from over 130 countries around the world. We had to reorganize every aspect of our leadership team, of our organizational structure, of our technology. I mean, man, the transition was immense. It was an incredibly tough time, but really exciting just to see that level of traction. And I'm thrilled to say that we made a great success of that first course. And we were then able to use that momentum in order to get into the other top universities. So in fairly quick succession after that, we managed to establish partnerships with Cambridge University, Harvard University, Stanford, Oxford, LSE, and many more. And this I guess, meteoric growth got the attention of NASDAQ-listed 2U, and they made us an offer in 2017 that for us we realized was just an incredible coming together of two complementary companies. We focused exclusively on online short courses. They focused on full degrees online. And we realized that if we brought our forces together, we could create something something quite formidable. So yeah, that acquisition then took place middle of 2017.
How involved are you with GetSmarter today, Rob?
I'm not. So I, with the best of intentions, actually had planned on staying on for quite a long time. I think the reality is that the process of living on a plane for a very long time, then going through the acquisition, which to any entrepreneurs out there sounds very glamorous, but I would tell you it's absolutely brutal. I mean, the process of it's not just the mechanics and the negotiation of it. It's the emotional process where effectively your baby that you have poured love and energy into every single breathing moment of your life up until that point is suddenly up for adoption, and it's a very emotionally charged time. So I'm not sure I call it burnout, but I was pretty darn spent towards the end of that process. So I ended up continuing to work in the business for about another 8 months, and then I actually concluded my tenure at GetSmarter. I think it was kind of around the middle of 2018. I think that's exactly right, yeah.
But it seems that the allure of education and making a difference in education didn't go away. You're now involved with the Valenture Institute, Hubble Studios, Injini. Tell us a little bit about what keeps you busy today.
Yeah, sure. So actually, Hubble Studios, interestingly enough, we actually started that out of GetSmarter. So in 2013, we were getting a lot of inquiries from corporate companies and most especially corporate companies looking for us. They saw what we were capable of doing with online education and the university experience that we were offering. And we started getting an increasing volume of inquiries requesting, can you build us an online campus? Can you build us an internal academy? Can you build a occupational health and safety training program for new entrants into the company? And these requests just kept on coming in, and we realized, cheapers, we really can't ignore this anymore. There's definitely a line of business here. So what we did is in 2013, we started something called GetSmarter Business Solutions. What we thought we were very clever at the time. We'll use the same staff complement that is both working on the short courses, but then we'll also use those same people and we'll do them on a B2B fee-for-service business. And whilst in principle that made a lot of sense, practically the operational jarring between a fee-for-service business and a highly productized B2C business, it just couldn't be more different. The workflows, the client relationships, so much of those things are challenging to effectively intersect. So we ended up effectively offshooting that as an independent business. Got a wonderful CEO in place, a gentleman called Hannes Geldenes. And he's continued to build that business as a tangential business to GetSmarter over the years. So my involvement in Hubble Studios is not huge. It takes a couple of hours a month, but that continues to be just a great business that's growing exceptionally well. And then Injini is a EdTech incubator. It's in fact the only EdTech incubator on the African continent. That again, for me, is just a real privilege to come into contact with EdTech talent throughout the continent. I provide certain mentorship to individuals who are in the accelerator program, and help us to assist with decisions as it relates to financing new ventures and so on. So for me, it's really interesting, I guess, for a few reasons. One, I'm staying very much on the pulse of what's happening throughout the continent in terms of education, technology, trends, and so on. And secondly, I love engaging with young, inspired entrepreneurs who are looking to make a difference. And I think education it's such a privileged space to operate in, because almost by default, if you're drawn towards the educational space, you have a heart for making a positive impact. So it's such a privilege to come into contact with these incredible young entrepreneurs. So both Hubble and Injini I would consider very, very much part-time. After finishing up full-time at GetSmarter in 2018, I did take a couple months off. A couple more like 6 months. I enjoyed some chill time, lots of catch-up time with my wife and more, and then started getting very, very itchy feet. I ended up just kind of like throwing myself into things like Ironman triathlons and these kind of big endurance events. And whilst that was fine, I realized that what I was really looking for was another challenge. And I wanted a challenge that was not just me against myself, like for the sheer satisfaction personally, as opposed to something that actually can benefit someone else. So yeah, I mean, I'm an educator. I consider myself an educator before being a entrepreneur or anything else. So it was never a question of what industry I was going to go into. It was just which sector within education I wanted to focus on next. And for the longest of time, I've wanted to enter into the high school markets. I just think that It's a market that, for all it has achieved, there are major opportunities to fundamentally evolve the high school experience. It's such a formational and foundational process for young kids, and I think that with the application of let's call it a more progressive approach, we can really start to shift the needle in important ways for the future of humanity.
Rob, suppose the question that is most pressing at the moment and interesting is COVID. I would suppose logically that COVID would have almost accelerated the timelines of the business that you're involved in, being online-based education. What have you seen across your various investments as the rest of the world has sat locked up at home?
Yeah, I think that's an astute observation. I love there's an NYU professor called Scott Galloway who is just brilliant. He writes a weekly column, incidentally, called "No Mercy, No Malice," and if you aren't subscribed to it, just strongly recommend it. He made a wonderful point that I really appreciated around COVID, and his point was that what COVID is doing effectively is accelerating existing trends as opposed to necessarily creating new ones. And there might be some examples where that's the case, but predominantly what's happening is that we're taking existing trends that were kind of muddling along and we're just putting them on steroids and radically accelerating them. And I think certainly as it relates to online education, that's exactly what's happening right now. Many individuals, many families and so on have been forced into a situation where they are studying online. Many education institutions who would have deliberated over this for many years have been given have really just had to rise to the challenge of responding and finding a way to continue to engage with their students regardless of where they're located. I think this is resulting in a couple of interesting trends for me. One is that online education is a very specific skill set, and there's a strong science behind how to do it effectively, how you need to organize and structure your team for the appropriate support, the appropriate integration of technology. Learning analytics and big data is a massive contributor to successful implementation. And if online education is purpose-built and designed from the ground up for the purposes of online education, it can be an unbelievable experience. I mean, to give you a sense, we've got at GetSmarter, by the end of this year, we would have educated over 200,000 students from 154 countries around the world, and we've managed to maintain it at 92% graduation rate. That's very much because of the science and the rigor that's been applied in terms of designing those programs, supporting them as purpose-built online programs. What unfortunately ends up happening, and the experience that a lot of people are having of online education as it relates to COVID right now, is traditional brick and mortar, either tertiary institutions or schools, that are having to kind of on the fly figure out how to engage online. And so there's this kind of offering that's being put together with sticky tape and hope to try and keep the learning going. And again, this is not to detract from the immense heart and the work that's going in. Really, these institutions and individuals are trying their best. But I think one of the things that's happening is that we are seeing a certain muddying of the waters as it relates to the perception of what online education can be. So that's on the more kind of negative side. On the positive side, we're seeing just an incredible lift in the interest in purpose-built online education. So, I mean, as an example, Valenture Institute as a global private online high school, our inquiries have literally increased sixfold overnight as COVID started. People are interested in understanding alternative options. They're seeing, some of them are actually seeing that parents are seeing that their kids have actually done quite well in this online schooling environment, even though it's been put together by brick and mortar schools. And they like to see, and the thinking is very much along the lines of, well, jeepers, if they can do it in this environment, imagine what they could do with a purpose-built and appropriately supported environment. So certainly there's been a major uptick in the interest in online schooling. I know that GetSmarter is faring exceptionally well. Hubble Studios has got more work than we know what to do with right now. Universities around the world are looking to businesses like Hubble Studios to build out full degree programs so that in the Northern Hemisphere, at least, by the time September comes, these universities can actually still continue to offer master's programs, postgraduate qualifications, and so on, now fully online. So I think it's a very interesting time to be involved in online education.
And Rob, maybe to bring this to South African context, how does the online education penetration rates locally compare to those abroad? Obviously, we're a third world country. Access to the internet and computers is lower than the rest of the world. What are you seeing here?
Totally. The digital divide is my biggest concern. It's not just in South Africa, it is indeed in just about even major first world economies such as the US are experiencing this in a very, very significant way. I would say that what's incredibly challenging right now is the fact that the divide between those who have and those who don't have and have not is increasing right now. So students who are at private schools, formal Model C schools and so on, where they've got parents who can reasonably be expected to have internet access and laptop computers and so on at home, are still able to continue their learning, albeit in a slightly more clunky manner, with their teachers now digitally. You can be absolutely certain that students that are coming from quintile 1 and 2 public schools and so on, the learning has just stopped. 100% it is just not happening. And I think what's quite challenging about that is, of course, that continues to exacerbate the divide that already exists between those who have and those who don't have. I think what's more encouraging is that, as an example, at the Valenture Institute, we've also started a not-for-profit trust called the Abodi Trust. And we set up from the beginning of this year, before COVID was even a thing, we set up a program where we've got 28 learners in Mitchell's Plain who are from a quintile 1 school who are studying entirely online, but are coming into a physical space every day in order to get their internet access and so on. And there's a blended learning environment because the mentor that would typically be virtual is now available in person. But the results of that program have been absolutely stunning. I mean, really educationally, it's been amazing to see what can be achieved. As soon as COVID hit, we basically had to just get every single student set up with a Wi-Fi router that they could take home. And I'm proud to say that these 28 learners are the only 28 learners at a quintile 1 school in the whole of South Africa whose learning has continued completely uninterrupted. And I think what's encouraging for me is that, as an example with this project, we're collaborating quite closely with the Western Cape Education Department, and there's more interest than ever in what can be done digitally. And I think that COVID, again, is kind of forcing our hands to look at things differently. I mean, maybe, Dino, I can give you a sense. If we continue to go along the idea that we just need to build more schools, we need to qualify more teachers, we're not going to make it. So to give you a quick sense of that, in the Western Cape alone, we need to build 24 new schools per year just to deal with the population growth. We've got budget for 4, and we realistically end up building about 3. So what happens to the students who don't get into those 3 or 4 schools is that they either get lost in the system or they get shoved into already overcrowded classrooms. We have a systemic issue in South Africa, and it's the same issue that exists in the world, that we cannot build schools fast enough, and we cannot capacitate them with qualified enough teachers in a fast enough time. If we don't start to think digitally, we're just not going to make it. And I think what's encouraging for me off the back of COVID is that it's making officials in education departments and more finally step up and look at the space and say, we have to make a big leap. We have to start thinking differently about how to connect great teachers with students in underprivileged rural areas. And digital provides an incredible opportunity for that. And whilst there is a risk and it is a leap and this is a new modality, we can't afford to keep doing what we've been doing. It's not blimmin' working.
What does that mean for the future of tertiary and secondary education in South Africa? Will UCT go away, or will the blended learning model become more of a focus in South Africa?
I think that, it's going to be interesting to see the decisions that are made over the next while. I don't think universities like UCT are going away. I think that big prestigious universities increasingly what's already happening is that they are increasingly going online. And I think that what's going to happen is that there needs to be some consolidation. That we will see quite a lot of the mid to lower tier universities, TVETs and so on, fall by the wayside. That's a personal view. As top universities who fully embrace online, make themselves more readily available, it's hard to think why you would still choose to go to your local community college, which, if it's priced similarly, just because it's available in brick and mortar, when you could be accessing a more prestigious university online with the appropriate quality. And if the price point is comparative or competitive, it's hard to see why you would continue to make a more localized choice. I guess the challenging thing, even for the UCTs, is that the same principle applies with the Harvards and the Stanfords of the world as they become increasingly available. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here.
I suppose maybe a final question, Rob. From that pricing point perspective, How does the pricing for these types of current online learning programs compare to the pricing at South Africa's more prestigious universities and then the TVET colleges, etc.?
So, it's interesting. The price point tends to be somewhat comparable. A very well-resourced and supported online educational program is not substantially cheaper than a brick and mortar in person. I think one of the challenging things for universities like UCT is they also don't want to create immense disparity between two versions of the same qualification. The qualification is the qualification, and whether you're being supported online or whether you're being supported in person, there's a desire to keep that parity across. One could argue, and there are some universities that are trying this, where they have a brick and mortar version, which is the more elite, prestigious version, and then they've got a super cheap online version. But it's often positioned not quite as the same degree. You've almost got some examples of this, like you've got your MBA, and then you've got your MBA X or your IMBA, or some sort of descriptor that just distinguishes it as being slightly different. And there's a price point differential that's attached to that.
Is it true that online learning pass rates are generally lower than in contact, or is that very much dependent, to your earlier point, on the quality of the program and the offering?
Yeah, it's something that, look, we've got to continue to expand our vernacular as it relates to online education. Online education is not online education is not online education. Just as the university experience that you might get at a Harvard is not necessarily the same as you might get at a Walter Sisulu. They're both tertiary degrees, but it's not necessarily the same. So certainly our experience with purpose-built, high-touch, socially rich online learning is that you can achieve incredible academics, very high graduation rates, very high levels of engagement and satisfaction. A lot of this comes down to the specific design and support.
Rob, it's been really fascinating catching up with you. I think a key takeaway for me is that concept that COVID maybe isn't changing the trajectory of the way we evolve as a society, but rather accelerating it. That's Robert Paddock. He's the co-founder of GetSmarter and various other online education initiatives, chatting to us today on online education, not just in South Africa, but globally, and what the future may hold during COVID-19. Rob, thanks so much for the time.
Great pleasure. Thanks, Dina.